In its independent report on Fukushima wastewater safety, the South Korean government says Tokyo's planned discharge suits international standards as long as the wastewater is treated as planned. IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi says he is aware of the concerns in Korea regarding the Fukushima water release, adding he is willing to meet with the opposition parties. He is set to land in South Korea later in the day. Samsung Electronics posts an earnings shock for the second quarter, hit by weaker chip demand and a drop in smartphone sales. LG Electronics, on the other hand, has recorded its best performance on the back of strong sales of home appliances. It's July 7th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with South Korea unveiling its own analysis of Japan's Fukushima wastewater release. It says the planned discharge meets international safety standards, such as those of the IAEA. But it did advise Tokyo to make several improvements to the plan. Our Lee Si-woo has details of that report.
The South Korean government announced on Friday the results of its own independent analysis of Japan's plan to release wastewater from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant and confirmed that it does meet international standards, including procedures promulgated by the IAEA. That is, if everything goes according to plan. Minister for Government Policy Coordination Bang Moon-gyu said at a daily briefing that the analysis was conducted by an on-site inspection team and the nation's Nuclear Safety and Security Commission. The team especially checked on wastewater purification capacity and Japan's ability to react to unexpected situations, such as an infrastructure breakdown. Other factors reviewed included the credibility of radioactivity checks and monitoring. Bang said the team and commission concluded that the plan met radioactive concentration standards for matter released into the ocean.
However, this is only a review of the appropriateness of the plan proposed by Japan so far. Therefore, the government will negotiate with the IAEA and Japan to check on the final plan for the release of the wastewater. If there are changes, we will carry out additional reviews.
According to a simulation by Japan, the radiation impact on the South Korean coastline is estimated to be about 1/100,000th of average levels that occurred naturally. The government here said it would take around 4 years at the earliest and 10 years at the latest for the contaminated wastewater to reach offshore South Korean waters. Meanwhile, Seoul advised Japan to check on its advanced liquid processing system's filters more frequently and to look for more types of nuclides while strengthening the evaluation of the effects of long-term radiation exposure and gathering more data on the radiation exposure level for residents in and near Fukushima. Seoul will continue monitoring Tokyo's plans for the release and will establish a system for reporting any abnormalities it detects. Additionally, it has been made clear that the reports by the government and the IAEA are unrelated to South Korea's current ban on seafood imports from the Fukushima region. The ban will remain in place, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety confirmed. South Korea has banned all seafood imports from 8 prefectures in Japan near Fukushima since 2013. Lee Si-woo, Arirang News.
The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, who wraps up his trip to Japan and heads to Seoul this evening, says he is aware of the concerns about the wastewater in South Korea. He plans to meet government officials as well as the country's opposition party lawmakers. Our Peun-ji reports.
Despite the IAEA's recent approval for Japan to release Fukushima wastewater into the Pacific Ocean, anger and anxiety still remain in South Korea and other neighboring countries. To address these public concerns, the chief of the UN Nuclear Agency, Rafael Grossi, will be arriving in Seoul on Friday evening. In a press conference in Japan on Friday, Grossi said he is aware of these concerns and that he plans to sit down for talks with South Korean government officials, as well as the lawmakers from the opposition Democratic Party.
I intend to see, of course, government officials, and I have received a request from the opposition party to meet, and I will do so happily. I think I should meet with everybody. that has, of course, relevant interlocutors that have views on this.
Grossi also added that he thinks the scientific works of the IAEA should be trusted, stressing that the agency does not take sides.
We are neutral, we do not take sides. We look at the science, we look at the problem, and we have an assessment. And then we can discuss. And this is what I intend to do as of this evening when I arrive in Seoul.
Also on Friday, Japan's nuclear regulator granted approval for the facility that'll be used to release radioactive water into the ocean. After completing safety inspections, the country's Nuclear Regulation Authority issued a certificate to Tokyo Electric Power Company, which operates the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Japan's GG news agency reported that now that the certificate has been issued, facility-related preparations are complete for the discharge. That's close to filling up tanks placed around the nuclear plant to full capacity. Heunj, Arirang News.
South Korea late last month conducted its biannual military drills near Dokdo Island. That's according to a Defense Ministry official on Friday. The drills aim to boost defense around the island. The exercises have sparked protests from Japan, who on Friday voiced regret and reasserted its false territorial rights over Dokdo. Observers have noted a decrease in scale compared to the ones held during the previous administration, with no Air Force or landing forces participating. However, the military official said the Marine forces deployed were not largely different from past years. Samsung Electronics posts an earnings shock for the second quarter, hit by weaker chip demand. LG Electronics, on the other hand, has recorded its best performance on the back of strong sales of home appliances. Moon Hae-ryun tells us more.
Samsung Electronics has projected an earnings shock for the second quarter of the year amid a slump in the global semiconductor industry. The company on Friday disclosed an estimated operating profit for the April to June period of some 600 billion Korean won, or roughly $459 million. This is the lowest figure recorded by the company since the financial crisis of 2009, and a drop of nearly 96% compared to the same period last year. It follows a loss reported in the first quarter of 2023 and comes despite a forecast in April that the decline would ease in the second quarter. While Samsung's MX division, made up of mobile communications and consumer electronics, was able to patch up the losses made up in the chip sector with the release of the new Samsung Galaxy 23 smartphone in February, the effects of this release are expected to have waned in the second quarter. However, with the impending release of a new foldable smartphone coming up in the next quarter, forecasts for Samsung's mobile division are optimistic. With the rise of the artificial intelligence industry and their use of chips, industry insiders expect demand for chips to improve in the third quarter and for the firm to start making a recovery from hitting rock bottom. Meanwhile, LG Electronics' performance hit record highs for any second quarter as a result of a boom in the electric vehicle industry. It was 12.7% higher than the same quarter last year, coming to some 892.7 billion won, or roughly $684 million. This is the second quarter in a row that LG Electronics operating profits have overtaken Samsung Electronics, and the second highest sum recorded for the same period in its history. In terms of sales, it peaked at nearly 20 trillion won, the highest sum ever recorded in the second quarter of the year. Analysts accredited the company's focus on premium product-orientated sales in its home appliances, high demand for electric vehicle parts, and stable supply chain management. The backlog of orders for its EV parts is expected to accumulate to 100 trillion won by the end of this year. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea's LG Energy Solution is maintaining its leading position in the global EV battery market, excluding China. According to SNE Research, a firm specializing in energy-related companies, LG Energy Solutions saw a year-on-year increase of 52.7% in battery sales in the first 5 months of the year. It dominated the market with a market share of over 27%, followed by China's CATL, although the latter narrowed the gap to 0.1 of a percentage point from the last year's 6.9 percentage points. Korea's SK On and Samsung SDI ranked 4th and 6th respectively. In the meantime, during the same period, global sales of EV batteries, again excluding China, rose by 52.5% year-on-year. Korea's current account balance in May was back in the black, showing a surplus of over $1.9 billion. Further improvement is expected in the latter half of the year. Our finance ministry correspondent Lee Dae-yeon has more.
South Korea's current account balance returned to the black in May. On Friday, the Bank of Korea said that the current account recorded a surplus of $1.93 billion in May from a deficit of $790 million for the previous month. This was largely due to the goods balance, which has seen a surplus for 2 consecutive months, and a rise in dividend income from Korean subsidiaries located overseas. May's surplus was already widely expected by several industry insiders and government officials, as Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho last month mentioned that the country's current account balance is likely to see a surplus from May. This also aligns with the government's economic outlook that it will see a recovery from the second half of this year. However, the accumulated account balance for the first 5 months of this year is still in the red by some $3.4 billion. By sector, the goods balance posted $1.8 billion of surplus in May. Exports dropped 14.7% from the same period last year, a plunge for 9 months in a row now. Specifically, shipments of chips, petroleum products, and industrial chemical products dropped due to the global economic slowdown. Imports, too, saw a decline of 13.5%, especially commodities such as coal, petroleum products, gas, and crude oil, which posted a 20% on-year drop. The service balance was in the red by $910 million. With the ease of COVID-19 restrictions, the travel balance continues to see a deficit as more people tend to go overseas trips, especially to Japan. In terms of direct investment, Korean investment to overseas markets and foreign investment to the Korean market both increased, while foreign stock investment to Korea saw the highest rise since the relevant data was first compiled in 1980. One expert says May's figures are a positive sign for the current account balance.
The majority agrees that the current account balance will now continue to be in the black as the impact of China's reopening is expected to begin showing, which will lead the boost in exports. But what matters is how much of a surplus it will see.
He also said the amount of surplus partly depends on when the impact of China's reopening will start to appear, as that will likely affect the rebound in chip exports. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
The U.S.-led coalition of nations aimed to counter threats posed by illicit synthetic drugs will officially kick off Friday, Washington time. The coalition consists of 84 countries and global organizations and will begin its first ministerial meeting online on Friday. The U.S. State Department says the group seeks to stop the manufacturing and trafficking of drugs as well as minimize their damage to public health. South Korea will also take part, but China did not respond to an invite from the U.S. Washington had been pressing China to stop exporting chemicals used in making fentanyl, the biggest killer of adults in America. In other news, the world is warming at a disturbing pace. As tangible proof of this grim reality, the global average temperature marked a new record this week. Our Choi So-young has the details.
The global average temperature exceeded 17 degrees Celsius from 3 consecutive days from Monday until Wednesday this week, setting a new record. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has announced that on July 5th, the world average temperature recorded 17.18 degrees Celsius, surpassing the previous record of 17.01 degrees on the 3rd. Before this week, the previous highest global average temperature was 16.92 degrees Celsius in August 2016. Experts predict the record may soon be broken again, given the warm ocean temperatures caused by El Niño and the impact of climate change.
It is warming, and it's the warmest we've ever seen, but also if you continue on that trajectory, it becomes the coolest years, cool summers that we will experience for the next couple of years.
Experts point out that El Niño has not yet reached its peak. Data released on Thursday by the European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service shows that the world experienced the hottest June on record since its observation began. Its temperature recorded 0.53 degrees higher compared to the June average over the last 30 years.
It's within the realm of the climate is warming, and we are starting to see events that remind us that the climate change is real.
Officials forecast July this year to be the hottest month since the last interglacial period, approximately 120,000 years ago. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
K-pop girl group NewJeans on Friday unveiled a couple of pre-release tracks for their upcoming second mini-album, Get Up. They are called NewJeans and Super Shy, and the music videos for the two tracks also dropped on the same day. In particular, the video for NewJeans features a collaboration with the American superhero TV series, The Powerpuff Girls. NewJeans are set to release their second EP on July 21st. It is time for our weekly arts and culture segment. We have our culture correspondent Song Yujin in the studio. Welcome back, Yujin.
Great to be back, Jongmin.
I haven't seen you in the newsroom for a while. Where have you been?
Well, Jongmin, I just came back from Gangneung yesterday, which is located in South Korea's east coast, and I was actually there to cover the World Choir Games, the biggest international choir competition in the world. It's currently taking place in the city. So it kicked off on Monday, July 3rd, and it will run until next Thursday, July 13th. And this is actually South Korea's second time to host the games, with the first taking place in Busan in 2002. And so I had the chance to really enjoy the mesmerizing performances from choirs from all over the world, and had the chance to even speak with some of them. Let's first take a look. The Choir Olympics have come to South Korea's east coast city of Gangneung. Around 8,000 participants from 324 choirs representing over 30 countries are taking part in this year's World Choir Games. While it's a contest, the atmosphere feels more like a festival. Here, there are choirs, each with their own unique charms. Among them is the Calling Choir from Korea, who rose to stardom last year after earning a fourth-place finish at a Korean broadcaster's choir audition show.
When most people think of choirs, they tend to imagine serene and classical music. We wanted to break this stereotype and prove that a choir can perform in any genre. We developed our own style, fusing hip-hop and pop with popping, locking, and walking.
And it's not just about competing. The World Choir Games are also about sharing the joys of singing. So throughout the event, choirs from all around the world are holding free concerts across the city, like here at Gyeongpo Beach. The lineup includes some of the really talented, like the Diocesan School Old Boys Association Choir from Hong Kong.
We search very hard for our choir sound, a very distinct character, the sound of this choir. And then we try to continue to build, look for new exchange opportunities. We try to commission new work to keep ourselves fresh. And there are those who embody the game's theme of peace and prosperity for all. The Young People's Chorus of New York City is comprised of 2,000 choristers ranging from 8 to 18 years old.
Community is about bringing people together, learning from each other, knowing that one song with many voices can bring peace and love. There is also the Wagner Choir from Ukraine.
Due to the ongoing war, the 30-member choir had to take a 16-hour bus ride to Poland to catch a flight to Korea.
Yes, our message that we want the world to know that our country is in pain right now, but there is always a hope about peace.
Singing has become a part of our lives. It gives us hope and faith that things will get better.
The World Choir Games reminds us that music is a universal language that unites the world, transcending borders and cultures.
Such a compelling voice, I would say. I heard that the results of the Part 1 competition were announced today. So who were the winners?
Well, Jongmin, I was really surprised because except for Ukraine's Gov't choir, the 3 other choirs that I actually interviewed and got to meet in my news report actually won the top prizes in their category. So I was really shocked. So to give you more information, the calling choir won in the scenic pop show choirs category, the Diocesan Schoolboys Association choir in the male choir, and the Young People's Chorus of New York City in the children's choirs category. And I have to say that the Gov't choir was invited to perform and not compete. And simply listening to the first few minutes of the performance gave me the strong impression that they really had the talent and dedication that needed to be winners in this competition.
Sounds exciting. And with the second half of the games approaching next week, what can we expect in terms of participating choirs?
Well, so the choirs who are taking part in the second half of the competition are actually starting to enter here in Korea today. And there are some noteworthy teams that we must pay attention to. One is Belgium's Amaranth choir. They are currently ranked 5th in the world out of the more than 1,000 choirs. And they also got the highest scores in the previous World Choir Games that was held in Flanders in their home country. And another choir that's worth keep noting at is the Netherlands De Koor Close Harmony Choir. They're currently ranked 19. And before Part 2 starts, there's actually a really interesting and exciting event. That is the Parade of Nations that will take place on Sunday this week, July 9th. And it's considered the highlight of the World Choir Games every edition because this is where choristers from different countries walk through the streets of the host city. So we'll get to see all these international singers dressed up in their traditional costumes, singing their nation's song, walking down the streets of Gangneung. So it seems like it will be really interesting.
Looking forward to them all. All right, our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin, thank you.
Thank you.
Sweltering conditions will continue for this weekend for central regions. That includes here in Seoul. A dome of high pressure will trap a surge of hot air across central parts of the country, keeping temperatures in the 30s. Highs in Seoul will be reaching 31 degrees Celsius, while other regions such as Chuncheon will be reaching 32 degrees. The heat will create unstable atmospheric conditions from time to time, which will lead to frequent scattered outbreaks of rainfall. In the meantime, a monsoonal rain front across the south will drop showers until tomorrow. Jeollado provinces, the south coast and Jeju Island will see the most amount of rainfall with up to 150 millimeters in the forecast. Gyeongsangbuk-do province will see up to 100 millimeters. The weather agency has warned of potential landslides, flooding, and other damage across the south, so please take extra precautions. Morning temperatures will be in the similar range tomorrow. Seoul and Busan will be starting off at 23 degrees. Highs in Seoul and Gwangju will get up to 31, Daejeon 30, Busan will reach 26 degrees. The capital region will see frequent showers until early next week. That's all for now, and to the weather conditions around the world.
And that is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arirang TV is conducting a quality and satisfaction evaluation to enhance the broadcast service for viewers worldwide. Please visit our website at www.arirang.com to provide your honest opinions. Participants will be entered into a draw for a chance to win prizes. 2023 Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
Ireland, like Korea, is a very outward-facing country. Our peoples are curious about the world. Like Irish people, it matters to Koreans that your story is told well, that people understand your values, your culture, your perspectives. Arirang plays a really important role in telling Korea's story to the world and to promoting the Korean brand. This fosters closer friendships between Korea and other countries and enables better cooperation. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello everyone, it's Friday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. South Korea slashed its growth outlook for this year to 1.4%, which is a 0.2 percentage point drop from the previous forecast. Yet the finance ministry says it expects better recovery for the latter half, with improvements in inflation and the nation's employment rate being indicators. What are the details behind the finance ministry's expectation, and what do experts forecast for the economy? For an in-depth analysis, we invite Professor Oh Jun-seok, Dean of Sookmyang Business School. Professor Oh, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening. And we also have Professor Shim Myung-gyu from Yonsei University. Professor Shim, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, first question to our Professor O. Now, earlier this week, President Yoon Suk-yeol said that the second half of 2023 will be an inflection point for the economy. In what ways is it an inflection point?
Yes, President Yoon said the second half of this year will be an inflection point. And the Prime Minister suggested the Korean economy will see a rebound second half of this year. Though uncertainties remain still, I suppose, yes, it could be a momentum of shift in two respects. First, global factors of economy tells us to set a plan for a change. China is the center of concern for Korea as number one trade partner, and then it is considered China's slowdown would be a damage to Korea. But last year, trade volume with China tumbled down by 26%, and then we have experienced the China risk much more than enough during the COVID-19, risk of market and risk of supply chain disruption. Now, Korea needs to insulate the China risk, I suppose, as China's potential should not be ignored. But Korea must pivot more aggressively toward India, Vietnam, as well as other ASEAN countries and the Middle East to extend its trade frontiers. And second, domestic factors also tells us it's right timing of industrial transition and applying different approaches. Inflation is falling from over 6% to the 2% range, and last month's turnaround from a trade deficit to a trade surplus. The transitional period calls for structural reform to reassess and rebuild economic fundamentals, and President also called for removing killer regulation that deter the investment decision. In short, two things to count as inflection, as China shift, and system reformation. China risk should be insulated, and Korea plan to go all out for promoting export and investment to lead momentum for an economic recovery in the future.
Right, I see. So second half could indeed be a momentum for South Korean economy. Now, Professor Shim, the finance ministry lowered the overall 2023 economic growth rate outlook to 1.4%. And as we have already discussed, it pointed out that the pace of growth will double in the second half compared to the first 6 months. What is your view over this overall growth forecast, and what would back this growth in the second half of this year?
Well, first of all, I think that the fact that the official forecast is even lower than those of our other institutions, such as KDI, OECD, and the IMF, implies that the economic environment has become even worse during this year, posing negative forecasts on the Korean economy for the coming next 6 months. If we exclude 2020, which is the exception due to the COVID-19 crisis, this figure is the lowest since the financial crisis. As the uncertainty on the future inflation rate has not been fully resolved, I do not expect that there would be active expansionary monetary policies across the world. Also, the current state of the government on the tax collection is not that positive. This further implies that the government cannot really impose active fiscal policies to support the economic growth. If the world economy does not recover faster than we expect, so that export cannot increase that than we really expect, I expect that the negative view on the economic growth this year will not change that much.
Right, I see your point. Now, we are going to talk about significant economy-related indicators one by one, but let's first focus on exports since South Korea is an export-driven economy. Now, fortunately, the Finance Ministry reported a trade surplus in June for the first time in 16 months. Could we say, Professor Oh, that exports are on the way to making a recovery? I mean, do you see this trend continuing?
Just to hit the bottom, it could be an encouraging sign, but not yet. A lot of things to do more to continue this trend. I perfectly agree on Professor Shin. Tell you why. Simply speaking, more than 50% of imports to Korea consist of raw material, energy parts, or components. Think about for a moment. July and August are vacation season of the year. Could you guess? Manufacturing facilities would lower the inventory level of raw material, parts, and components by reducing imports. One of the major reasons that trade deficit has changed into surplus, but the market is not recovered. We have to pass the acid test in September and October. Of course, I do respect a lot of tough efforts for Korean companies and governments to boost up the trade, for pioneering new market and new trade item. Outstanding performance increased export to Europe and the Middle East. Export to EU rose 5.7% on a year in the first 6 months, and outbound shipment to the Middle East spiked up 14.3% to $9.79 billion. Cars and machines spearheaded the jump in this region. Car export by 56.9% up, and machines by 8.6% up. EV market in Europe and machinery in the Middle East, where the economy is relatively stable and oil prices are low. In addition to new trade item, think about it. Korea will work on being one of the weapon sellers in the world. To invigorate the venture, Korean government will inject $141 billion in trade financing within this year. But still now, it is a time of investment, not the time of harvestment. So we have to wait to invigorate this kind of venture. Still, we have time to wait for the performance.
Right, I see. So there is still a long way to go in terms of export area. Now, Professor Shim, in order to promote exports, President Yoon Suk-yeol underlined the importance of correcting rules and systems that go against the global trend. What is the President Yoon referring to? Could you give us some examples?
Well, my understanding on what President really implies by promoting exports through correcting rules and systems is that the Korean economy should boost up productivity through correcting or eliminating old rules or systems that lower creativity of the Korean economy. As we know, importance of creativity to achieve competitiveness at the world markets become more and more important. In this sense, I think the government intervention that directly affects the firm's activities, like the investment, might be the hurdle that prevent creative construction or destruction to occur in this economy. According to my understanding, there are so many rules that are set by the government, and such restrictions drag the creative activity of entrepreneurs. Maybe we can think of the new policies like imposing sandboxes for the new firms or new industries, maybe helpful to relieve this kind of concerns. And also, according to a recent study in macroeconomics, even a rule that is set to correct existing problems in the economy and hence is effective will create problems in the long run because the rule is not adopted by the changed environment. In addition, I think the traditional notion that the government lets the private activities still remain in the Korean economy, and maybe that is another rule or systems that the president referred to. So what I think is it was appropriate for the Korean economy to allow the government to intervene the market economy a lot when the Korean economy was at the early stage of growth. But the situation has changed so that I think what the government has to do is to minimize its intervention on the market so that we can really increase the creativity of the market economy.
Right, so the government needs to minimize its intervention in the business sectors. Now, one more thing, Professor Shim, he also mentioned how monopolistic structures that share in building cartel benefits must be strictly destroyed. What does cartels with benefits refer to, and what direction is the Yoon administration pursuing right now?
So I have the consistent idea with the answer to your previous question. I think the direction is to pursue the market-led economy because any cartels sharing benefit with each other will be hurdles to spur competitions, which is essential for achieving higher growth rates. For example, the recent collapse of an apartment complex construction site in Incheon can be the result of a cartel in the construction sector. Each level of firm wants to maximize its profit, and thus they make a cartel pursuing benefits and ignore safety of the citizens. Such cartel might be enhanced with the naive supervision of the government that also wants to provide more apartments promptly. Another example would be the case of chicken processing firms fixing prices between 2008 and 2017, which was fined by the government. What they exploited was the consumer surplus by making a cartel, and prohibiting such behaviors would benefit the Korean economy and might boost the growth rate.
I see your point. Now, Professor Oh, meanwhile, the primary focus of South Korea for over the past few months has been inflation, and it slowed down to a 21-month low of 2.7% in June, showing a clear trend of easing inflationary pressure. Now, how do you see this figure, and compared to other countries, how are consumer prices in South Korea right now?
As you mentioned, the inflation rate fell below 3% for the first time in 21 months. According to Statistics Korea, consumer price index CPI stood 111.12 in June, up 2.7% from a year earlier. It marks the first time the rate fell to 2% range since September 2021 and continues the 5-month slowdown in consumer price growth that began after posting 5.2% in January. This is also true to other major countries. EU inflation was 7.1% in May, down from 8.1% in April. And the United States is at compared to 4.93% last month and 8% last year. It is a commonality. Inflationary pressure around the world comes down slowly. The decline is attributed mainly to drop in the energy prices, which plunged 25.4% in June from a year earlier, the largest fall since January 1985. Other things being equal, lowering inflation will be a good signal for the market expansion, recovering market volume, both domestic and global market, which is expected to boost some of Korea's key industries, especially semiconductors and the EV sectors. As to Fisher effect, is a kind of economic terminology, but as to Fisher effect, expecting the inflation is strongly related to interest rate changes. As the consumer price has been dropping since February this year, it means the POK is expected to have more room to maneuver, at least the interest rate hike speed down, or no more interest rate hike ever after. In this respect, some are projecting the POK will likely loosen the monetary policy. However, the Korean government have a conservative view on the overall economic growth projection.
Right. I mean, it is great to hear that inflationary pressure is slowly going down. But Professor Shim, though South Korea is showing signs of recovery based on major economic indicators, including inflation, authorities say there are still lingering uncertainties that could affect the economy. What are they, and how should they be tackled?
So I can think of 3 uncertainties surrounding Korean economy. First uncertainty is that the interest rate is still high because of the remaining concern for high inflation rate. Importantly, global warming, together with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, possibly affect the food prices, and hence the inflation rate in most of the economies might not decline that much this year. The worry over the inflation rate will make the central banks not to lower the rate quickly than market expects, which should result in lower consumption and investment. Second uncertainty that I thought was that there is a pressure on the production cost arises from the policies to lower the speed of global warming. New technologies to lower CO2 increases the cost of farms so that the inflation rate does not decrease that quickly. And the third uncertainty is a possible negative shock from the financial market because of the very prolonged high interest rate period. Financial crisis is known to harm the overall economy more than the usual recessions, as we have experienced after the Great Recession. Given that most of the factors that I mentioned are sort of out of control from the perspective of the government, my suggestion is that the policymakers should focus more on the plausible targets, such as stabilizing the financial market so that we can prevent the further financial crisis.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Oh, I'd like to also tap on the budget area. Usually, to stimulate the economy, a country increases its budget. However, South Korea's tax revenue reportedly fell by around $28 billion in the first 5 months of this year from a year earlier. Now, before we move on to talk about whether we need an extra budget or not, why has tax revenue fallen?
Jokingly say the name of Finance Minister of Korea matters. Chu Kyung-ho is a combination of extra budget with a preference. In this respect, journalists and politicians might think Finance Minister would turn on extra budget for economic recovery. At the moment, there are two policy options to boost up an economy: spending money by extra budget and cutting budget by saving money. As saving money is to deleting burden, far from populism, so spending money is to delaying burden, for populism. A finance minister of Korea has taken a saving budget rather than spending budget. And recently, he repeatedly and confirmed Korea was not considering planning a supplementary budget, despite a looming decline of $12 billion worth of tax revenue as of February from a year ago, amid a slow economy. Now, as you commented, why fallen tax revenue? There are many reasons to tell, but what is certain is tax is levied when income is realized. As the economy went into recession due to COVID-19 and Russian-Ukraine crisis, business opportunity has withered globally. It is natural dropping tax revenue comes from dropping business income. In addition, the government have to support necessary consumption of the lesser group by cutting fuel taxes, individual consumption taxes, and even real estate taxes. And the previous government dropped supplementary budget 10 times from 2017 to 2022. There is no free lunch in economy. Spending money should be redeemed in the next generation's burden, mainly due to increasing taxes. Of course, the government have to count in the factors of keeping the livelihood of the lesser group by supporting basic consumption. It might be considered for investors as a speculation when the Korean government could propose an extra budget to reinvigorate the economy and boost the saving demand. In this reason, that Korean government have to turn on saving revenues.
Right, I see your point. Now, before we wrap up this segment, I'd like to also tap on the rate-setting meeting that is going to take place next week. So, Professor Shim, given the lower consumer price rises, many expect the key interest rate to be maintained at its current level. What do you see?
I also agree with the usual idea that the meeting will maintain the policy rate at the current rate. The inflation rate in June was 2.7%, which is already pointed out by Professor Oh, which is even lower by 0.6 percentage point from that in May. While it is still higher than the target inflation rate of the BOK, which is 2%, the gap between the actual inflation rate and the target inflation rate is now lower than 1%, giving more rooms for the BOK to wait until the uncertainties surrounding the Korean economy can result. However, we should also notice that the core inflation rate has been lowered by less than 1% point from the peak, while the inflation rate measured by CPI has declined by more than 3% point from 2022. This implies that the decline of the inflation rate measured by CPI might be mainly driven by temporarily stabilized food and energy prices. With the uncertainty mentioned before, I think this fact implies that the BOK will take a cautious step to raise or lower the rate.
Right, I see. But one of the concerns that we have is, the widening gap, interest rate gap between the U.S. and South Korea. Do we also have to worry about this part, Professor Shim?
Yeah, so let me first share the fact that the current interest rate gap between Korea and the U.S. is 1.75 percentage point, which is at the historically highest level. So what I agree with the view of some experts that the BOK should closely look at what the Fed will do, as Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, signaled the markets about 10 days ago that the U.S. economy seems to be still strong, suggesting that the economy can endure more interest rate hike. The unemployment rate in May was 3.7% in the U.S., which is a positive sign for the economy because it's low, and it is accompanied by 4% inflation rate, which is the opposite sign for the economy. So this is a figure which is still twice the target inflation rate of the U.S. And thus potentially pushes the Fed to raise the policy rate. So the further hike in the interest rate of the U.S. without changing rate in Korea might widen the interest rate gap further, which can potentially stir capital outflow, which is not the problem at this point, but the situation may change if the gap becomes more larger.
Right, I see. We'll just have to wait and see what decision Bank of Korea makes. All right, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Shim, and of course, thank you, Professor Oh, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be next Monday with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the weekend. Goodbye.
Arirang TV is conducting a quality and satisfaction evaluation to enhance the broadcast service for viewers worldwide. Please visit our website www.arirang.com to provide your honest opinions. Participants will be entered into a draw for a chance to win prizes.